So first place I always like to start, or one place we want to start, and I want to acknowledge that this PowerPoint presentation is adapted from one that is from a group in the Northeast here. But the first thing, in wearing my farm management hat, I would say that you need to know what your income goals are. For example, are your income goals, especially initially, is to break even and maybe even turn a profit in the first year, or maybe break even or turn a profit in, say, 3 to 5 years, because it is going to take some time to get this, develop this agritourism enterprise potentially. So maybe in the first couple of years, not going to make a profit, but at least need a goal of when you think you're going to make a profit. Do you ultimately wish to have all of your household income, or the contribution you make to household income, assuming you may have an off-farm job, to get all of your income from this agritourism enterprise or combination of enterprises? Or is it just to provide supplemental income while holding a full-time or part-time job? And that also gets in maybe into the seasonality of having agritourism business, that for a particular time of the year, you choose to have an agritourism enterprise or business, and the rest of the year you rely on full-time or part-time off-farm business job. Also, thinking down the road a little bit, if you have children or others that are interested in the farm or in the agritourism business, isn't some additional income necessary to be generated to allow children or other partners to come into the business? So you need to be thinking about, and I'm sure especially those of you that are already in the business, is that how do we set the price point? Well, and there's also one additional point that I want to make here is that your time especially is a limited resource and must be valued. So when evaluating or is determining a price for whatever agritourism enterprise you're thinking about, you must, what I like to call is plan for profit, or build in a return for yourself. Farmers traditionally have been price takers instead of price makers, especially at the wholesale or commodity level. But as more of a retail type of business, this is your opportunity to be able to determine a price where you're going to make a profit. And that oftentimes boils down to the time that you're putting into this enterprise. So, obviously you can analyze your competitors' pricing in the region, and other things you can examine there that are listed. One thing is especially if you haven't started, is to do some market research. And maybe that's not as easy as you think, but maybe through Facebook or some other social media, you can maybe do some type of a survey or poll to find out what customers are willing to pay. Also, you need to know your costs. Again, that's paramount and a foundation of knowing what your costs are. If you haven't started yet and you probably don't know what your costs are, well, do your homework and make your best faith estimates of what your costs are going to be. So the price has to be a balance between your internal costs and the market demand. It always boils down to, supply and demand. What will the customer bear, and think about that as far as market demand, but also, again, re-emphasizing, know what your income goals are. It also comes back and it ties into establishing the plan for profit. So what are some costs to consider? Would be legal and accounting costs. I highlight that one because there may want to consider a different type of business structure, especially with agritourism. It's retail, you're dealing with people. There are a lot of risk exposure, And so forming a limited liability company for example, for your agritourism business may be something that you want to think about. And there's a cost in establishing that LLC if that's the route you wish to go. And then there's also costs to maintain that LLC, and also does complicate to some extent accounting or tax preparation as opposed to having an agritourism business as a sole proprietor. Costs could obviously, new equipment, we've talked a little, some of the upcoming things that Lindsay mentioned may require permitting. And so there's going to be some costs, such as glamping, for example, may require some permits depending on what your town or county will allow. Land is not necessarily, we look at the land, whatever you're doing. Yes, you may own the land, but if you're using land for a different purpose than what you may have used it in the past, then maybe consider that you're renting the land for that agritourism enterprise to yourself or as a cost. Taxes, certainly under taxes, if most or all agritourism type of operations will require the collection of sales tax. If you're the type of farm business or business you have now does not require collecting sales tax, that's something you will have to consider and do when you start your as you're doing your agritourism. Now, these others are pretty self-explanatory, so I won't elaborate on them. So how do you go about determining what a potential cost and return might be on an agritourism enterprise? Do your homework as much as to learn about agritourism enterprise, and that's true. And here's an example of what I'm talking about. This is just an example. Honestly, the reason I chose this example is that this is a enterprise budget that is available to you, and you can see the link there. And I will work with Lindsay and follow up after this to provide the resources that will help you to think about the pricing your agritourism enterprise. But this is one that's ready available and can be used as a model of something you could use for other agritourism enterprises that you may be thinking about. So the corn production listed here so we're going to be looking at a corn maze and a hypothetical 5-acre corn maze. So we look at what does it cost to, first of all, plant the corn. It's $575 per acre. We're doing 5 acres. So, obviously, hopefully the math is correct. In researching and looking at, unless you come up with a design yourself, there are plenty of companies out there that will design a corn maze for you. Yes, it will cost money. And from what I saw, it's around $1,500 to have them design it, maybe $1,015, and then to have you lay out and cut the initial maze throughout this 5-acre cornfield. Then there's going to be some maintenance, obviously, of the path during the growth until it's ready in the fall, and of course fuel. And then so that's mainly the preparation. This is kind of getting it ready so that you can have the corn maze in the fall. And here are some example expenditures for what it's going to cost to operate it. You're going to need signs. Apparel for employees, is that necessary? Well, yes, it is. From my experience in visiting some type of agritourism type events, you want your patrons to be able to quickly identify who works there and can help them if they have a question or need direction or something. So apparel is something that's very important. Marketing, we're saying that you're going to do three event things and for $3,000 each. That's of course up to you. Wristbands, expecting a pretty good turnout for this and are getting 10,000 wristbands. Are there any improvements to the parking area? Liability insurance is a must-have. And even if you have liability insurance right now, please talk to your insurance agent as you're at if you're not having anybody come onto your farm or your property right now, and you are going to have some type of a agritourism, and almost all of them do, are having patrons visit your business or your property. That means that your risk exposure is changing. So what does that mean as far as a change in your liability? Insurance, we didn't include any land charges here, but you could conceivably charge a rent, for that 5 acres that you owned. You could put a rental rate in there, a modest one. Hired labor, you can see here, hired labor manager hours. We're not breaking that down. It may be that you're hiring someone to be a manager, or maybe that's what you're going to pay yourself, or another family member for managing this corn maze. And then the revenues, what we're charging per person. You see that return from the corn maze, and then we do get some receipt from actually selling some of the corn. That's what's remains standing. And so the total that we get net return from the corn maze is $30,000 to $675. And whatever enterprise budget you do, okay, I want you to pause and think about that. Is the amount of the net return, is that meeting your financial goal, your family goal that you have for this enterprise? $30,000, almost $31,000 sounds like a lot, but if your goal is to, and maybe your goal is to have a part-time business off farm or outside of this business, maybe $31,000 is enough. But if your goal is to eventually have this be your full-time business, then maybe 30,000 is enough. Or you look at it a different way. If your goal is to be able to have enough income to bring another family member or a strategic partner into the business, is $31,000 enough? So those are some of the things. It's one thing to look at the bottom number and say, "Ooh, that's a great number, let's do it." But you really need to be evaluating and looking at what your financial goals are. So that's the enterprise budget. What we want to look at, one other way is that, so this budget kind of came up with a total amount of what your net revenue would be. Another way to look at this is a break-even analysis. I'm going to share 2 ways that you might look at this. One way is the number of, in this case, it's a farm tour, a number of tours you need to do. Another way, there's a slightly different way, and I'll remember that when I get to it. So any break-even analysis is going to essentially do this. It's a pretty simplified one. And you could be a lot more complicated or have much more factors or values added to it. But the point being here is to want you to be thinking about fixed costs and variable costs. The fixed costs are things that, if we're doing a farm tour, if we do 10 farm tours or 100 farm tours, these fixed costs, such as taxes and insurance, are not going to change. Depreciation is not going to change. Where we look at variable costs are going to be based on, for example, the number of tours that we conduct. If we do only 10 tours, where our employee expense is going to be less than if we're doing 100 tours, 200 tours, fuel, seed, and marketing as well. So how many tours do we need to have here? The thing to think about is 80 tour what we want to look at. So getting back to the general breakdown is that, okay, for example, you paid $1,000 for insurance. You may have only, whether you conduct 10 tours or 100 tours, you still paid that $1,000. The improved parking parking lot. All of these things are all fixed, what we would consider fixed costs. Improved parking, farm market improvements, child play area. Clearly are investments, but we do want to kind of recoup that investment we've invested in making those improvements. So the variable costs are going to be workers' wages. And that's this, as you can see, this is old because it's only $8 an hour. So take that with a grain of salt. And fuel is $10 total. So we're going to charge $10 per tour. And that we're not saying how many people have to comprise a tour, but we're going to just for now talk about $10 per tour. So how many tours do we need to conduct? I already given away the answer here, but here's the formula to be able to calculate that is break even divided by total fixed costs divided by price minus variable costs. You can see $4,000 was our total fixed cost. $100 was our price and minus 50 variable costs. So we have to conduct 80 farm tours to break even. Now, I always say that's break even. Okay, that's wonderful and great that you want to break even, but is that all you want to do? Do you want to break even on this? No, you want to make some money on that. And so maybe in your fixed cost over here, may want to consider adding like a planning for profit, such as an extra $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 as to what you wish to get as far as a return on investment for this. And that we'll drill down a little bit more with that in the next example as well. So that obviously, if we include some type of a plan for profit or a return on investment in that, it's going to increase the number of farm tours that we're going to need to take. So here is the planning for profit example. Let's say that we plan to host 100 one-hour farm tours this season, want to have a return of a profit of $3,000 for the farm tours, roughly $30 per hour, which which may be low, which may be high, or which may be low. Again, going back to what are your goals? What are your financial goals overall for whatever you're doing as far as your farm business? What price should be charged? So we do our total fixed cost plus variable cost plus total profit. And you see that we're coming up with, in this example is a little bit different. We have a $4,000 total fixed cost, $5,000 total variable cost, plus we're building in $3,000 worth of profit. So our total cost that we're putting into this is $12,000. And so we want, how much should we charge per tour? We're hoping to do 100 tours per year. We're going to have to charge $120 per tour. So just the take-home message here is that these are just slightly different ways of looking at doing a break-even analysis. There are plenty of we can provide you with some other resources to help you to calculate break-even costs, and hopefully to help you to examine and evaluate what your break-even costs, and will the market bear something higher than the break-even cost if you're considering or thinking about changing what your price point for whatever agritourism enterprise that you're thinking about. So for those of you that are thinking about an agritourism enterprise, and maybe for the rest of you, here are some things to be thinking about. And you may want to do kind of a combination of any of these. I've seen these as well at some agritourism businesses where they may charge an admission fee. There's one farm that comes to mind for UPIC. They charge an admission fee. Okay, and then they so let's say they've got, it's a multi, they have fruits and vegetables. So then let's say they charge $5 per car, and you go in and go and pick some vegetables and fruit, well, then they will charge you for the fruit on a per unit basis for the fruits and vegetables that you charge. And so whether that's a admission or an activity fee, that I think that's semantics, but you can figure out what you want to call it. Obviously, if you many where you have spirits, wine, or brewery, cidery, a tasting fee may be involved as well. Then if you are think about a facility rental. If your property is big enough, is there an opportunity to not only have kind of a main type of one of the production of some type of agritourism business, but could you also rent out part of it for dinners, for bridal showers, even for weddings or some other type of rent it as a venue? A show fee, we'll be talking a little bit about glamping, and I believe we also have been talking about farm lodging in the past, not going to food service, and then so on. So some other things, additional costs, additional considerations for determining price is that you do need to keep in mind is that what kind of value does the buyer place upon what you are offering, and that's going to vary, and it's going to vary. For example, one corn maze may have even in the eye of a consumer may have a different value than another because of location. What else is related activities may be involved with the with a corn maze, for example. So you've got to be almost thinking yourself, put yourself in the mind of a potential buyer. Is what value would they place upon this? And that also gets into thinking about what is your target audience, or what is your target buyer for the type of agritourism that you're thinking about. A farm stand, it could be somebody that's single, but that they value local products. They want to be able to get in and out quickly to buy some staples or whatever that they may want. It still may attract families, but at the other a corn maze, the type of buyer that you're most likely going to attract or think about is a family. They're out to be entertained. They want to be able to go through a corn maze and be able to looking for a family event. Let's say price is an indicator of quality. Don't be afraid to charge what you feel you need to, and also to what the market will bear, because people may look at a higher price and think in their mind, and there are price points where you can't price yourself out of it, but oftentimes based on the value, type of buyer, the higher price means that they feel that they are getting a better quality experience by going to your agritourism event, based in part based upon the price. And of course, you always need to be conscious and cognizant of your competitors as well. But don't be shy to price yourself, determine a price or set a price that is higher than competitors. Not crazy higher, but certainly one that is higher than your competitors. So what we're showing here is that there are segments to your consumer characteristics. You've got the price segment. The price segment. These are the people that are going to be price conscious, or are going to allow yourself to be able to have some wiggle room as far as price. They're willing to pay a little bit more. There's going to be the loyal buyer. To some extent, they are going to if we look at the perceived value, they're going to have a high perceived value, but they are going to be low on the perceived pain. So that you need to be looking at the price segment. They're going to have a high, are willing to tolerate a higher price, but they are going to be looking at and not necessarily have a lower perceived value. Convenient shoppers, a lot, and what we're seeing a lot in farmers markets is that people are looking at something that's convenient and lower cost. The one that you're really interested in is the value segment, because they are going to they do have a high pain, and they also have a high perceived value here. So the take-home message here is to know your intended customer and what influences them, and more importantly, be realistic to know what you need to do to attract and how you can attract them. And this is a quote from Dawn Tilmani McFadden. So if you don't have some customers thinking that you charge too much, then you aren't charging enough. Granted, that's kind of a fine line, but then again, you can, and something to be thinking about, not have thought of it is not, especially if you haven't started your agritourism enterprise for this year, if it's something more for summer and fall, obviously this is a good time to be thinking about what you're going to charge this year. And if you have been in business for a while, then, and have built up somewhat of a clientele or client base, look at what you're going to be charging this year. And if you are going to increase it, now is the time, or especially if it's something more midsummer and fall, now is a good time to be thinking about communicating to your customers, your prior customers, that we've raised our prices this year, and this is why. Our costs have gone up. And if you don't necessarily have to go into specifics, but if you choose to go into some of the specifics, my experience in dealing with helping some livestock producers look at what they need to charge for some of the products they have that they're selling, they've done some hand wringing about, well, how do I go about, I have to raise my cost, but how do I go about telling my consumers about it? Well, let your consumers know now and bring them along. And honestly, I think in part consumers also are experiencing increased costs in foods, although food prices have somewhat stabilized, but they too realize that costs have gone up, and so they know that your costs have gone up, and if they are loyal, or if they perceive that and understand the value of what your enterprise, your agritourism business is doing, they are willing to maybe pay a little bit more to continue to enjoy that experience. So we want to move on to talking about pricing strategies, and whether you're starting out and have had have been doing this for a while, or thinking about starting it. There are this is something to consider. So there are basically 4 major strategies to consider, and they are premium pricing, value, competitive, and penetration pricing. And again, well, we'll come back to this in a minute. So this is premium pricing. This is a product that has one or more unique characteristics. It's greatly differentiated in the market. This is somewhat of a short-term strategy, as far it would have to be something pretty unique, as from an agritourism point of view, something that's pretty unique for your geographic area. Let's, for the sake of argument, pick on-farm glamping. Okay, if you're the only one in your county thinking about this or going to have glamping on your farm, maybe even look at it like a 60-mile radius or a 50-mile radius, then that's going to be something that's pretty unique, so that you would be able to, and depending on, and again, look at where are you located, how close are you to a major metropolitan area where you might be able to attract people who are looking for an on-farm camping or a farm stay type of experience. If you all of the stars align for you, well, maybe then you're able to start out with a higher price than what you might think, because you have something that is unique for your area, and people hopefully are going to be willing to pay more. If you set your price that at what you might call your at the premium pricing, and you're not getting any traction with it, nobody's willing to sign up for it, well, you can always bring your price down. It's hard once you've established a price for a season or whatever, it's hard to raise that price. So think about again, what we're thinking about here is think about with premium pricing, and then start with it. And it is somewhat of a short-term strategy, because quite honestly, once you're doing it and people see, your neighbors and others see what you're doing, they're going to jump in and want to do it as well. So you're kind of on the cutting edge of this retail or this this type of agritourism business in your area. And why not take advantage of it by capturing some premium pricing? As others start to enter into it, and then you're probably going to have to reconsider what you charge for it. So value pricing so this is where you would kind of move to, is after the premium pricing is going to be a little bit lower than premium. As it says here, is that now you have some competitors that are in your area. Maybe or you're also trying to, maybe that when you first start out, those that are willing to pay that premium price are willing to put a great value on what they're paying for that experience. If you want to come down a tier and look for maybe those that are not willing to pay as much or don't for the perceived value, that's where value pricing is coming in to the market, or for something like that. And then competitive pricing, then basically this is most likely where you are going to, looking at for example, farmers markets, tasting rooms, whatever, pick your owns, whatever. These are where it could be potentially very competitive, and so you need to identify and record what your competitors' pricings are. But always be mindful is there an opportunity based on perceived value or whatever to maybe charge a little bit more. But this is ultimately we're kind of starting out high and kind of working our way down to the lowest price points or pricing strategies. And honestly, this is probably where if you are in a kind of a competitive area, this is probably, especially agritourism wise, this is where you may be at this point, depending on the type of agritourism business you have or are considering. And then there's also penetration pricing. Again, going back to your values and goals, you may make a conscious effort that you want that your goal, it's not one that financial goal that we mentioned initially, is to make a penetration into market and capture market share. So maybe you do charge you will charge something less than what the going market rate is, so that you can gain market share, and then maybe slowly inch up the price that you charge. Is that feasible? in agriculture or in agritourism? Maybe, maybe not. But where we really do see it is with more for products that you buy in a grocery store or other places in a department store or whatever. A big brand name wants to introduce a new cereal or something new. They're going to reduce the price on that consciously just to be able to help increase market share in the cereal market, to be able to hopefully capture part of the market share of cereals. So here's a table that looks at kind of pulling all these together. I apologize that they don't line up a little bit. In that is that so the premium, there are no substitutes. The barriers are going to be fairly high. Really, the sensitivity is pretty low, and the goal is a very high or unit margin. Ultimately, that would mean profit. For value, the economy. There are few substitutes. The barriers are going to be still high. The price sensitivity is a little bit low, and your goal is profit. I'm going to skip down to competitive. There are going to be many substitutes. The barriers, consequently, the barriers for entry are going to be fairly low, but sensitivity is going to be high, and then scale is going to be high. You got to protect your market share, and then penetration, whether it's going to work for you or not, is going to be pretty. There are going to be many substitutes. The barriers are going to be low, which could be go, but the sensitivity is going to be high. Economies of scale are also going to be fairly high as well, and market growth and leadership is so again, market penetration is what we're looking for. So being a farm management sorry about that, hit the keyboard. So being a farm management educator, I can't help but say that keeping good records. Hopefully, one of the things that have can take away from this is that if you have started and maybe it's time to if you've got good records, great. But if after watching this or participating in this webinar or watching it, you decide, well, look at the enterprise budget or looking at break-even analysis, well, maybe I don't have all the information from my financial records I need. So this is, especially if your enterprise hasn't really started yet for this season, it's a good time to reevaluate where your the records you are keeping on this business are, and maybe make some changes. And honestly, good records will help you to analyze progress from year to year. One of the maxims that we say in farm management and general financial management is to say you can't manage what you don't measure. So review what your records are telling you now, and hopefully some questions will arise as to when you're looking on the expense side, especially, why is that expense high or not looking that great? Well, then maybe you need to drill down a little bit more this year and break down that major cost area into some sub categories to be able to track it better. And you can read the rest of it. There's also some other things that we would recommend that you consider also based upon your records that will help you to generate for your agritourism business or for your business as a whole. And that would be, the financial statements, the balance sheet, income statement, cash flow statement. And I've already said that, if good records will help you to complete an enterprise budget for your business now, and help you to fine tune what your pricing strategy, or be one part of how you determine and come up with a pricing strategy for your agritourism business as it stands right now. So I think we'll oh, and then one more is that this is something that we need to always make sure that we make people aware of. And it's one of the things that I learned in farm management a long time ago, learning from some of my mentors and trainers before, is that one of the alternatives that any business should have on the table at any given time is an exit strategy. That's always an alternative. So part of an exit strategy would be to determine as what specify situations where in which the business part you would want to close the business down. Doing something today or in the future simply does not mean that it's going to remain profitable or something that's going to be lucrative in the future. Also, the economic viability of the business and desirability needs to be taken in place, and also take into account one of the things about agritourism that you need to be mindful of is that in large part is that you're dealing in a business where you're expecting people or expect your buyers to have disposable income. And so, as we well know, and many of you may have experienced this, when we have changes for whatever reason, if we go into recession, are going through a time of an inflationary period. Maybe some of you that have been in business for a while, what have you experienced as far as change in participation or income? Maybe this is something that you need to keep in mind, and also not saying that this necessarily, particularly if you have a variety of agritourism enterprises or activities on your business, maybe it doesn't mean that you have to exit everything, but it may mean, again, and good records are going to help you look at that, as to what enterprise, if you have multiple enterprises, what ones may I need to exit at this point, and maybe re-examine and come up with a new combination of enterprise agritourism enterprises for my business. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing this and